Welcome to Abyss Gazing, a horror podcast where we celebrate all things mental health and spooky.
I'm your co-host, Mark.
And I am your co-host, Josh. And on this episode, we got some awesome things planned for you guys. But if you guys are watching us on Twitch right now, we are now Twitch affiliates, which means you guys have emotes. And I promise you, on this channel, we will only be doing Nicolas Cage emotes. And it's going to be awesome. Our first one is actually programmed in there. It is the priest face from Face Off. You know the... Yeah, you know which one I'm talking about.
That's like all his movies, though. So
wait till you get to like the third tier. It's just gonna be Mandy, and it's gonna be wonderful. Yeah. So on this episode, we're gonna be talking about Censor. But before we go ahead and get there, we're just gonna announce, we're gonna throw this on. You guys are gonna hear this so many times in the next 6 months. We are planning our first film festival, and we are super excited to present to you guys an experience unlike any other film festival that's ever been in attendance and experience. I promise you guys have never ever seen a film festival like this. It is horror-centric, mental health themed. It is going to be April 29th and 30th, both digital and at the Alamo Drafthouse in Winchester, Virginia. You guys, if you're a filmmaker and you just happen to be watching this, or you're listening to this on a podcast, wherever you guys get your podcasts from, go ahead and click the links in the descriptions below. It is filmfreeway.com/horrific hope film festival. 80% of all the money that we are making from submission fees will go to the cost of the film festival, while 20% is actually going to be going towards mental health resources into film festivals, conventions, and hopefully after school programs. That's our 2022 goal. Like I said, this is going to be a festival that you guys have never seen before. It's going to be all over the world celebrating DIY filmmaking and at the same time also it's going to be featuring open conversations on mental health awareness and topics like depression, suicide, addiction, anxiety, and much more. Plus, we're going to have a plethora of resources for all those in attendance when we do it at the Alamo Drafthouse. More information will be provided in the links in the show notes below. But I am super happy to bring on our guest because, as you guys know, last year we relocated our offices to Richmond, Virginia, and I've had the pleasure of getting to know our guest for tonight's episode. He is from Fox-Paw-Productions. He is a writer, he is a director, and one of his movies is called Cardinal. It is a short film about a grieving man that it turns to murder. Basically, how to put it, Mr. Todd Densmore.
Hey,
what's going on, man?
What's going on? Thank you for having me. What's happening? A grieving man that turns to murder is exactly what should be printed on the cover of that box.
There's so much within it, and I guess like jumping into Cardinal right away, there's so much within Cardinal that it's such a textured story. And I'm kind of curious how much of that is autobiographical and how much of that is you being a fan of the genre.
I mean, I'm not a murderer, so I guess not so much autobiographical. But definitely taken from my my fandom of the genre for sure. It does touch on a lot of experiences that I think people have gone through, and I wrote it sort of in a weird way through the eyes of my mother. I was inspired by how people grieve and how people deal with the loss of a loved one. And I lost my grandmother around that time, and I saw how my mom was coping and dealing with the loss of her parent. And that was obviously something that I had never experienced before. And ultimately will, and it's something that we all do, and nothing that we ever look forward to. But how do we cope with that? How do we cope with this extreme loss? And I think, the story of Peter was something that kind of came to me, and what if this man's grief and his mourning took on a more sinister side of his kind of persona. So his way of dealing with the loss of his mother, and dealing with the demons inside of him, that she instilled in him, since he was younger, just kind of came out in his acts of violence, I guess.
What I love particularly about this is the fact that, we always talk about how grief manifests, and grief manifests in a plethora of ways. Like, there's not one correct way to grieve. And I think Peter's journey throughout the entire story, one of my favorite sequences in this is the therapy session.
Yeah.
And you kind of get to see also how his character arc overtakes a lot of it. And so we were talking a little bit before we started the show about favorite movies of the year. And so my favorite film of the year is actually a DIY movie, and it's called The Stylist. And a lot of that movie, Mark, shut up. A lot of that movie deals with that main character kind of dealing with an output for grief in a very light way. And it's interesting where the director takes that character, but also at the same time, it's such a rich character arc to get to watch someone study grief and go through it and kind of see like how they shut down, do they come alive, do they turn to murder, what would happen one night if those true crime documentaries got a little bit too real for you.
I mean, true crime documentaries have almost become a blueprint if you look at it, but
they've really changed into something like cultural, I mean, I remember true crime podcasts when people first really started to get onto the idea of podcasts, or the first, start of Netflix true crime docs. They really seem to be very niche until now. They're like this thing that everyone is obsessed with,
It's super strange.
It's
yeah.
I think it just goes to show that everyone is really deep down truly messed up. Maybe, I don't know, or likes to put themselves in certain positions. I don't know.
I think it's more of delving into the forbidden that most people wouldn't even do or contemplate. And I think that's become more of what it's about than anything else. Like, I'm actually watching one. I think it's called like the Raincoat Killer or something in South Korea. This guy went on a serial hammering spree. He had a giant hammer he made, was killing people. So it's yeah. I mean,
was he inspired? Like, was he like sitting down, like reading Thor, and just be like, what if Thor was a killer?
So it goes into detail that I guess it started happening after the South Korean economy kind of had a massive collapse in, I think it was the 90s.
Okay.
And what little bit of detail they have given so far, because I'm not through it all the way, but what little bit of detail they've given so far as part of it was that he was holding like the upper class responsible, and those were a lot of his victims at one point. Now the part I'm in, he's killing hookers. So they all seem to resort to killing hookers at some point. But yeah, he had
as one does.
he had a hammer that he made specifically for this.
Interesting.
Yeah,
interesting.
But it's on Netflix. I just watched another one about a murder that happened in Cork, and they had no clue how to handle it because they hadn't had a murder in like 100 years. And the whole documentary was them figuring out how to handle it as well as the actual investigation. So yeah.
That's fascinating. I think like in like smaller communities, they may not be as exposed to those sorts of things. So when there is a situation like that arises, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, they had no clue what to do because they never had to deal with it. Yeah. So, and that's kind of what the one, like I said, I think it's called the Raincoat Killer, Raincoat Murders, or something like that. That's the same problem they had in South Korea, was that they had never dealt with anything like that, so they were trying to figure it out. One episode they talked about where they actually had him in custody and he got away. They went to go look at some of the crime scenes with him to get more details, and he escaped in the middle of it, and they had him in custody. So I'm curious to see how it turns out. I haven't finished the series yet, but I'm one of those weirdos that it's like horror movies or serial killer documentaries. That's my A and B of the night.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, as Scream has told us, movies just make serial killers more creative.
Exactly.
And so with that said, how did you kind of get started into doing filmmaking? I mean, what came first? Because you're both a writer and a director, and also a producer as well.
Yeah.
So kind of what came first for you?
I honestly, that's funny that you mentioned it. Literally the movie Scream. It changed my life. Swear to God. I saw that movie and my whole just like world imploded. And I was like, I think I want to make movies. Because I had been, everyone's raised on watching films, but that was the first movie that truly hit me as a young adult in a way that's like, this impacted me. And I became such a fan of that film, which brought me on to a larger portion of just the horror genre. And I was like, I want to make movies. So, I started writing just really, really, really bad Scream ripoffs in high school, as one does.
Yeah.
And then, went to a college and got a little bit of education in video production. And from there, I met some really cool people. I got hired on as an assistant director in a couple of features in Maine, and we shot one in Maine and shot a film in Montana for a month. And throughout that process, I was like, I really want to make movies. So I said, okay, well, screw it, let's make a movie. And I wrote a really shoddily put together script, got a credit card, maxed it out, and made a feature-length film with my friends. No crew, just me, the camera with a mic attached, and my friends as the actors. And we made this just kind of this weird, dark drama of a film. And that just kind of sparked something. And I just never really let that spark die, So,
well, I mean, it's not a bad idea. That's what they did for Blair Witch, was a camcorder and people wandering around the woods.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think that was back in 2005 when I made that film, and it literally didn't do a whole lot of anything. Got into a couple of festivals, but and then.
But I'd did you pay off the credit card?
Eventually. It took some time. It took a lot of nights waiting tables at Applebee's or working at the movie theater, but I did, yeah. And then I would say probably about 4 years ago, I co-wrote and produced a short film with a buddy of mine, and that really just kind of reinvigorated me. And I was like, okay, I got to do this for real. I gotta, I can't just let this be a one-time thing that I've done, once every 12 years. So then I set out and came up with the idea for Cardinal. I'd written a number of screenplays, some features, some shorts, and throughout that process, I decided to just go all in and make a 30-minute slasher film, essentially.
And what's interesting, particularly about your filmmaking trajectory, is that for shorts, they're always on the longer side. I was really surprised when I was able to actually place this in my Blu-ray player, and I was curious about how long it was, and I was like, oh, this is 25 minutes. Like this is well worth revisiting and sitting down and showing someone. And so much so that Cardinal was actually ended up being one of our featured shorts for this past year's Horrific Hope live stream fundraising event we did in October, and I'm super grateful for that, by the way.
Happy to have it seen.
Yeah. And but I'm kind of curious, like is there a obviously when you're doing 20 to 30-minute shorts, obviously the next logical step is a feature. Is that something that's in the horizon for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I'd like to make a feature for real sometime. Making short films is a great way to practice and a great way to kind of figure yourself out as a filmmaker. Whether you find your strong suit is it in the writing of it? Is it in the on-set directing, the editing, putting the production together as a more producerial role? So I think, through Cardinal and the short films that I've worked on since then, I've definitely found my strong suits. And with every project you learn. But yeah, no, I do think if I never set out to make a feature again, I would be severely disappointed with myself. So yes, it is in the cards for sure.
I'm excited about it. Obviously, I know that it's not coming within the next year.
No, I got a much bigger production happening in the next year.
Yeah.
Not a film production, but yeah, me and my wife are getting ready to welcome our first child, so that's probably going to take up some of my time.
Just a little bit.
a little bit.
You're going to be almost 60 by the time
I know.
you graduate.
I know, and then I'll finally be all right. Now let's make that feature.
Mark and me just get a call at like 9 o'clock at night. It's like, I'm ready to do it. Let's go.
Yeah, I got one that's in high school, about to turn 17, and I got another one that just started her freshman year at University of Memphis.
Wow!
So,
all right, I'll be coming to you for some tips then, Mark.
How do I do this? I don't know. I'm old. I don't remember.
All right, gentlemen. Well, before we get into talking about Censor and a lot of its themes and just lots of trippiness that's in this. Todd, hit us with this. Where can people find you guys online and follow upcoming productions and see the shorts?
Yeah, go to Facebook and look up fox-paw-productions. We're on there. We're on Instagram at fox_paw_productions, and then we're on Twitter at fox_paw-productions or fox-paw_productions. Just look it up. You'll find us on all the socials. and if you live in the Richmond area, search your local little Blockbuster little shops at the certain intersections. You may find a copy of our films there.
That's
not
where I found
actual, unfortunately, not actual true Blockbuster stores, but
Yeah.
Isn't the last one in like Alaska or something like that?
Nah, it's in Oregon, dude.
Oregon, yeah.
Oregon.
Yeah.
Somewhere over there. Close enough, general vicinity.
We're gonna road trip one of these days. Well, all right. We're gonna jump in and talk about Censor. This is one of the wildest movies that this year has brought us. And Mark, what did you think of this movie, man? We're just gonna jump into kind of general thoughts before we jump into spoilers.
Really? Okay, that's the route we're going today.
Yes.
It's strange. It came across a little bit as one of the slow burn horror. I was trying to figure out if it was like dystopian uber censoring or not, but we'll get into that later. Couple of little things like that I didn't quite catch. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, it's an interesting kind of slow burn movie and descent of a person going crazy. So
also, ironically, by grief.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk a little bit more about here in a few minutes. But Todd, you said you had thoughts, and I do. I've been waiting to hear these thoughts. So lay them on me.
I mean, listen. I thought like the first hour was really, really strong. The first setup of it all, I was completely all in. And then I don't want to say it falls apart towards the end, because it definitely doesn't fall apart, but man, it took a different trajectory than I thought it was going to. And her arc just it was not what I expected to happen, I guess. And I mean, I could go in full into spoilers, or we could wait a little bit. But I thought it was a fascinating movie that you had this character that seemed to be complete, that seemed to be, in control of herself, and then as the story progresses, you realize, oh, she has zero control over anything, not the way people perceive her, not the way that she is perceiving the world, and not over herself in general at all, you know.
There was a little bit pacing wise in the way the story progressed, not so much the actual content, but the progression of it reminded me a lot of The Invitation.
Oh, which I love. That was one of my
Yeah,
favorite films of that year for sure.
it's like everything happens in the last like 10 minutes, 15 minutes of the movie with a real slow kind of build up to it. But it had enough. The Invitation, I wasn't quite a fan of, but this had enough in it leading up to those events that it kind of kept you engaged for the most part, which is kind of an issue with the slow burn horror, is that you either have enough to keep you engaged until the final reveal, or you're just bored to tears. One or the other. I haven't found one that's kind of been in the middle. But this was more on the entertaining side than the cure for insomnia.
I am the only person on this call that has seen this movie more than once. I had the fortune to see this in theaters, and so I knew the basic beats of this movie, but there's still things even on a second viewing that I completely forgot about or that I didn't pick up on. So, Mark, I think this is going to be a lot like our starfish conversation,
Oh God.
where
I hated that movie.
I saw a lot of things because this ended up actually being one of my favorite films of this year. I really enjoyed this film, and Todd, I think you're right. Like the first two acts of this film are like have such a strong foundation, and then it doesn't quite like it really detracts like expectations, and I think that's really what I like about it is the fact that you're kind of going inside Edith's mind. Like for that last act, like you're seeing the world through her eyes. It's just not that first person John Carpenter, Michael Myers trajectory, like a viewpoint. Like you're actually seeing the world as she sees it, which I think is something that's so fascinating this movie does.
I really loved how, the the stylistic choices that the director made as the film gets into its final act, and she arrives at exactly the screen itself
Shrinks.
shrinks in, and I'm watching it.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, did they just change it? And I was like, no, this is happening in real time. It's slowly shrinking, and to me, it kind of like expressed a number of different things, but it was like her mind was shrinking because she was so narrowly focused on this one thing. So it kind of worked really well. I did enjoy that quite a bit.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's almost like you were seeing her tunnel vision as she was focusing on the one thing.
Absolutely.
That she was just focusing in on that one thing. And for some reason, a lot of the camera shots and lighting and the way certain things were done in that last few scenes, I'm thinking somebody had an influence from Mandy.
Yes. Oh, very much so. I loved the cinematography. One thing that I thought right from the get go. I mean, this film is really centered around the video nasties, and you want to think of grime and grit and just raw 16 millimeter film, and you just think of nothing clean and pristine. But the movie itself was just gorgeously shot. It was so clear and just such a pristine picture, and especially those shots out in the woods with the lighting. Just gorgeous. But yes, very reminiscent of Mandy for sure.
Yeah, I'm just gonna put that image up there. I love that last act with just it's so heavy with its blues and its reds, and not quite like red, but like more like maroon and like purple. Like there's such a like a almost like a hypnotic quality about the picture, the way that the cinematography flows with the horror in this one that I feel like you brought up Mandy. Like, that's such a great example, and I haven't seen his other film, like The Black Rainbow or something, Under the Black Rainbow or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
But like I've seen like images and like short clips of that, and that kind of has like that very distinctful thing. Like Color Out of the Sky, Color Out of Space also has that very distinct look, and I think that Censor is kind of that for this year. It has a very distinct and stylized choices where it's also, we talked about like the shrinkingness, and it also like that's also how the film opens. Because even the title sequences for all of the studios and the investors that are involved in this film is done on a VHS, and you kind of just it starts out very small and then gets wider. And I just kind of thought that book ending that was such a bold choice that I don't think that you see a lot in film.
It was a fun stylistic choice for sure, and yeah, like you mentioned, the opening titles. I love it when filmmakers are able to just, I don't know, immediately let the audience know, okay, this film is going to be visually arresting. It's definitely going to stand out, more than your, 9 other horror films or whatnot. And visually, I thought that this film was just one of its strong suits was its visuals for sure.
All right. Well, I'm going to put a official spoiler warning, but if you guys are still with us, leave it in comments in the comment section. I don't know where it is in terms of where you're watching it. It's my left or right, but let us know what you guys thought about it. We would love to kind of talk about your process through this film as you saw it, because we're all here for conversation and community here tonight. But let's go ahead and jump into spoilers for this film. And my first question that I'm going to ask is, Mark and I, we create podcasts. Todd, you create film. We all have a hand in creating content. And one of the things that this film, I feel like, does so well is this film speaks to the necessity, the backlash, and kind of like the world of censorship as a whole. And so my question is tonight is like to kind of kick things off is, should art be censored? And if so, to what degree?
No.
Yeah, people should censor themselves if they want, but
sure.
Yeah, censoring yourself is one thing. Censoring what you personally view or listen to is your own personal choice. But no, censorship, nothing good has ever come from censorship.
Yeah.
No time ever in history that I can think of has censorship been a good thing.
Yeah. And as much of a fan, or as much of not really a fan of, rating systems and whatnot, if, I'm not completely against the idea of allowing people ahead of time to know, okay, this is what's in the movie, because a lot of people want to protect themselves, and that's completely fair. But
yeah,
I think that allowing people to make that choice for themselves is the most important thing,
Yeah, and the rating system isn't a form of censoring. It's a formal warning that, hey, there's going to be some titties in this movie.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
You may not
said the
want your kid to
1980s.
see this. Yeah. So I mean, and this movie, Censor, is dealing with them censoring movies. Was the time period ever made clear in the movie?
That's one of the best things I loved about it.
It kind of almost takes that Batman the Animated Series approach to it, where like it feels old, but yet there's like still things that exist within the world that you still think could it be modern day. My personal opinion is I think it takes place in like the early to mid 80s.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, because the reason I'm asking is they're dealing with VHSs, And during the 80s, there was a lot of deal about censoring music and movies. And was it Tipper Gore was involved in trying to censor music? It was the whole creation of the parental advisory level on music was because of the whole government taking on the music industry. And you had musicians like Dee Snider and Twisted Sister showing up to Congress in full on makeup to testify against censorship. And you ended up with the parental advisory label on music because of it. And at the same time, as far as movies were concerned, you had things like Cannibal Holocaust, Evil Dead. Um, Later on, you ended up with movies like Martyr and a Serbian film that have all been banned at some point. They've all been banned at some point in some country for some sort of various censorship reasons. Cannibal Holocaust, for example, they actually had an investigation done because he did such a good job with the effects, with the visual effects, that they thought they actually murdered people on set. And because of how graphic it was censored. It was actually banned for a long time in a lot of countries.
Yeah.
I also think to some degree with Cannibal Holocaust, they kind of did the Blair Witch before the Blair Witch, where they basically
Oh, it's
killed the actors, quote unquote, but made them hide because a lot of the actors had to come out of hiding actually to during those court cases to prove that this was a legitimate
Yeah.
movie.
But the thing with that one was they legitimately killed animals.
Yes.
They did.
That
Yes.
wasn't fake. They legitimately tortured and kill animals, and that is
Well, Apocalypse Now, they did the same thing.
Yeah.
Milo and Otis, they went through a handful of kittens in Milo.
Don't
and
tell
Otis.
me that, Mark. Don't tell me that.
Yes.
You ruined it. No, I don't want to know this.
It wasn't. It wasn't until they started putting in animal rights and regulations to protect the animals that stuff like that didn't happen.
Oh man, I did not know that.
Yes, they went through a couple kittens.
And so there's a line in the movie that kind of progresses this. Sorry.
He's like,
I think I'm out, guys.
The last thing about Cannibal Holocaust is it's pretty much credited with being the OG found footage.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below, wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Interesting.
The Paramount Plus documentary Unknown Dimension would differ for that.
Really?
Wasn't there this came out late 80s? It just started to get this resurgence. It's like something about a birthday party and aliens.
That is the one I was talking about. Yeah.
I believe
the McPherson
tape. Yeah,
McPherson tapes. That's
which
right.
I saw. I've seen that too. I like my found footage. I believe Cannibal Holocaust was before it.
Okay.
It was, but there are It's weird because
So-
like some people like claim that like they will say that like Cannibal Holocaust is by technical standards, Cannibal Holocaust is the first found footage film. However, some people regard the McPherson tape as more authentic of what the genre represents and say that
Yeah.
is
correct.
the,
Like
the,
a
because
the
true found
grandfather
footage. Yeah.
of
the
found footage.
McPherson tapes is nothing but like Blair Witch style found footage. Cannibal Holocaust is movie execs reviewing the found footage from the documentary they were making in the middle of the Amazon. So it still falls in the found footage, but it's from almost the point of view of the movie executives analyzing the film and what to do with it.
That's such a dumb loophole. Like, let's just be honest.
Yeah.
It's still found footage, like 90% of the movie.
So, anyways, on that note, there's a line in Censor that Eden actually says that she says some things should be left to the imagination, and there are I will say like within the limits of the genre, I will say that like Mark, I know you strongly disagree, but there are certain lines that like I won't cross when it comes to the genre. And I definitely think that
What, in movies or censoring or
in movies like there are
Okay.
certain lines that like I just won't cross. I've had to I walked out of a movie out at Genre Blast this past year.
Oh, I
Which
bet
one
I
was
can
that?
name that movie.
Yeah, I bet you could.
Yeah.
Wait,
That movie
I wanna
was,
know.
I mean, listen, you don't. The name
Curious.
of the movie. Can I say? You want me to say it? Are you okay with me saying it?
Go for it.
All right. I'm guessing this is the one. The name of the movie itself is called Killing Small Animals,
Yes.
and it was the most gorgeously shot film at the festival,
Yes.
but also the most disturbing thing I've seen in a very long time.
Yes.
Were they like killing small animals?
And she
Yes.
was graduating to larger animals and larger animals.
Yeah. So
So it was essentially the progression of a serial killer.
Absolutely.
yes. So
Okay.
I love cats, and like that's like I have a pretty high tolerance, but like there's a scene where like she like gets the cat ready to like in the trap, and the entire theater just goes quiet, and I just go, nope, I'm out during that silence, and I just left.
I mean, that's part of the reason I wasn't a fan of the pool, was because they tease
Oh,
and tease.
yes.
The dog's gonna die, and then you watch the dog like hang, and the guy
Yes.
climb out of the pool by his
Mm.
dog, and you hear his dog's neck break.
Oh,
it's
that
like,
was
no,
so disturbing.
You guys are jerks. That
Yeah.
dog did not deserve that. You were dumb for going to sleep in the pool in the first place.
Yeah.
So
Correct.
I'm gonna agree with both of you guys from the earlier point we were making about art not being centered. I think for even mental health, like I don't want to feel like I feel like censorship has a way of saying what you say or the art that you're putting out in the world isn't good enough, so it has to be censored, and that really I feel like messes with someone's mental health. I know that when we first started this podcast, like I was like, who's gonna listen to me talk about my opinion on movies? There's so many more people that are qualified. There are so many people that are more articulate, and then I eventually got over it because I'm like, well, this podcasting is basically just a platform where I can literally say anything I want, and people are either going to agree or they're not going to agree. But I think that you need those not necessarily censorship, but you need those like ratings and like those content warnings in place, because while it's in the title, Killing Small Animals, I mean, it's a truly disturbing film. And our friends over at Genre Blast have tested my limits quite a bit. And Nathan and Chad, if you hear this, thank you for that.
Don't change what you're doing.
Don't change. Yeah. But also at the same time, there is, I think you need those things, because I know that like, while I don't look that stuff up very often, I know that like, I know my limits. And so like, if I ever kind of, get into a film where I'm like, okay, like this film has a very graphic rape scene. I'm not going to watch this. I'm not ever going to watch The Girl Next Door ever again. And
Oh man,
I constantly tell people to stray away from that film because of
Yeah.
how disturbing it is.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you've never seen the original I Spit on Your Grave.
I have seen the original I Spit on Your Grave. I hate that and The Last House on the Left.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Those movies are disturbing.
He had a slight obsession with like gang rape for a handful of movies.
Yeah. But like, listen, I know I like sort of defended the MPAA further back, and that's not what my intention was, because in a way, I mean, well, not even in a way. I mean, explicitly, the MPAA is censorship. I mean, you have a filmmaker that will create a movie. This is my vision. This is what I want. And the studio's like, okay, we want to get this in 4,000 screens. We need to get a rating because we want to make money. And then the MPAA is like, okay, well, you're going to have to do this, 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 and this to get the rating that will allow you to be seen to a wide audience. So, I mean, that in and of itself, that's censorship.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean they hit, what was it, Saving Private Ryan was hit by the ratings, and they had to recut quite a bit of it because it was about to be
many movies have that
NC-17.
story.
So many, yeah. South Park, you know what I mean?
Yeah, they should.
There's only so many frames of Satan's dick that you can see, you know?
South Park probably would have done even better if they had released it as NC-17.
Sure. Yeah.
It really would have.
Sure.
Then you have Josh's favorite, Showgirls. He loves Showgirls.
No lie, I love it, man.
It's trashy cinema at its best. No
it
doubt.
Is, yes.
No doubt. No doubt.
It's weird because like I love movies that are like very artistic, like The Stylist and Censor and Pig, like are some of my favorite films of this year. And then like you could talk to me about like something that's just kind of like very cheesy, like The Room and Showgirls, and I'm like, I'm also here for this.
Yes. I mean, I legit would put like The Room as one of my favorite movies of all time, but
hi, Mark.
Not in the way that you would expect it to. I just every time I watch that movie, I'm like, I'm having the best time of my life right now.
But if you look at the history of movie rating in the MPAA, some of the stuff, a majority of the stuff that's coming out as PG and PG-13 now, in the 80s and early 90s would have been R, or would have been R-rated stuff now would have been edited to make it R. So they've loosened up their standards quite a bit. Like, you'd never hear an F-bomb in a PG-13 movie. Now they're allowed, like, I think 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And so on one hand, yeah, it is almost a form of censorship, but on the other, they've loosened up their standards, I guess. Loosened up their ratings.
My thing is like you watch a movie, like, I mean, name any Marvel movie or any of these, Rock, Fast and Furious movies.
Oh,
and so many people are dying. So many people are getting their necks snapped. So much death and carnage.
Here's the thing, though.
It's not really seen on camera. There's no blood, so they get away with it.
Yeah,
it's the graphic of it.
But it's crazy. You could show 1 billion people die, and they're like, "This is good. Let's let a child watch it." I mean,
if you don't show blood at all, at any shot, if there's not a drop of red, then the movie can stay PG-13.
That's insane to me.
Yeah, like you look at like I think a great example of this is probably The Winter Soldier, where there's so many casualties throughout the course of that movie and there's not a drop of blood. And it's allowed to stay PG-13 because it's stylized action.
Right.
And censorship is really weird. And to go back to the thing you were talking about, the Room earlier, I think it's a great example because here you have a guy that created a film that is very incoherent, but it was his vision. And I would argue it is coherent if you follow the breadcrumbs. However, I digress. Go check out our episode on The Room, wherever you get podcasts from. But also, he didn't allow censorship to kind of neglect the way that he was going to do it. And I think that's why you have this now boom in DIY filmmaking and independent cinema, is because you're now in an age where someone with an iPhone or, an experience, can spend thousands of dollars to do stuff and not have to do censorship, not have to go through it. And now you also have the age of streaming. So there's so many DIY filmmakers that are getting content put on Roku, Tubi, Amazon, or are also making the festival circuits. Like there's an insane amount of festivals. Like Todd, I don't know how many festivals your content has been seen in, but like even planning a film festival right now, like, and being friends with people that I've met at other film festivals and just following their Instagrams, it's like, we're being seen in Seattle, we're being seen in Texas, we're being seen in Spain. And it's just like, it blows my mind how many film festivals revolve around that DIY scene that are just like, we want to see art for art's sake.
Because the do-it-yourself people are able to be more creative without the studio execs standing over their shoulder going, no, not you. I mean, look at how they ruined the Wolverine movie. That was all Fox Studios telling them, no, you can't do this. No, you have to change that. The independent people can do what they want.
Are we talking about the first two Wolverines? Or are you talking about Logan?
You're talking about the Wolverine.
Yeah.
Okay. I digress my intensity then.
X-Men Origins Wolverine.
I also digress.
Absolutely had that atrocity known as
I'll
Deadpool.
allow it.
That was trash. But the thing about the amount of festivals that are out there, it's great for small time filmmakers like myself. Like, I mean, listen, I have zero interest in, like, my goal isn't I want to make a movie so I can be seen and someone in Hollywood is going to snatch me up and now I get to make movies. I don't want that. That sounds awful. California, Los Angeles sounds miserable. I just like making movies because it's fun. I want to get together over a weekend with my friends and let's make some art. And the amount of festivals that are out there that allow our little films to be seen by so many eyeballs, that's why I do it. It's so much fun because we know that we're getting an audience, whether it's online or in-person festivals. It's just a really cool experience and a really cool idea knowing, like, wow, somebody saw my movie today. That's kind of cool,
I mean, I really just want to make a first-person movie from the point of view of the slasher and serial killer. I think that would be nauseating. Awesome. That sounds fantastic.
But it's through like a mask, so the whole time the screen you're only seeing it.
It's just the two
little eye slots. It's like the opening of Halloween, but for 90 minutes straight.
I mean, I was thinking more of like plain found footage, or maybe Hardcore Henry doing it like that.
Yeah. I mean, look, we came close to a found footage Jason Voorhees movie. I don't know if either one of you knew that, but
I think I had heard
very
about
close.
Listen, I don't think I need that.
No.
So I'm the crazy one in the room. I got it.
Yes. So anyways, Censor. So Censor, as we previously mentioned, it's Eden's. Basically, she's a video nasty. She basically is censoring what can and cannot go out, what people can see, what people can't see, and one of the things that, as we kind of digress from her professional life and kind of get more into her personal life, as we mentioned before, she lost her sister at a very young age, and her parents are kind of presenting her with this finality or closure that, like, she's gonna basically, like, they're gonna declare her dead. And from that, this movie that she ends up reviewing, called Don't Go in the Church, basically it kind of like sparks a linchpin that resets all of the events of her sister's death, or her sister's missing, just kind of like reset all into motion again. And one of the things that I want to talk about specifically is kind of the, you know, the antithesis, if you will, of why we do this show in the first place, is because there's a great correlation between mental health and horror, and you kind of get to see how this film triggers her, but also how it has this like lasting impression moving forward. And I think that horror is this great intersection to kind of talk about these things like racism, injustice, you know, sexual assaults, suicide, depression, grief, loss, like so many different topics, and do it in a way that is a social commentary, but also a compelling narrative in the same sense.
I mean, I think, you know, at the start of the film, she seems like I mentioned earlier, that she's just, you know, she's got her stuff together. She seems, you know, with it. And I think her parents bringing up her missing sister really kind of put that in her head. And then once she sees the film and leading up to her watching the movie, there's these little flashback moments, you know, where you see images of the day that her sister went missing. And then she watches this movie, and it seems to be like that in the film, there are two sisters and they're playing this game. And that seemed to be, you know, the game that she and her sister was playing. And it seemed like a very personal game, only known to the two of them. And so when she sees it and she sees this actress so strikingly resembling her sister, I mean, that just kind of like, you know, like breaks her. It makes her just like, oh, I know that my sister's out there, and now I think I found her, you know, and just definitely sets her on this path that she, you know, has no hope of coming back from, because at that moment she's already decided that's my sister.
Well,
You know, she's made that decision.
She didn't seem like she had her shit together to me. She seemed like somebody that was in a daily routine, and that was it.
That's fair. Yeah.
Which is quite a bit different. Someone that's depressed but doing their daily routine because that's what they do to get by. That's how she came across more to me than anything else. And then she decides this actress in the movie is her missing sister, and goes off the deep end, and it's all downhill from there when you add in that she's being blamed for this murder that happened because the media jumps in and says, oh, y'all approved this movie and this guy murdered his family like they did in the movie, and you're to blame for it because you were the one that were supposed to have censored it. So it's a combination. To me, it came across as she was already having issues. Then you add in the pressure from getting blamed for these murders and why'd you allow this to go through, and then she sees this other movie and that looks like my missing sister, it must be her, and she just kind of had one of those like moments and lost it, and it was all downhill from there.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think though that it's Todd, I think you bring up a good point. I think that it begins with the dinner sequence, where I think for a lot of us, like, we have a lot of trauma that's buried down and deep, and then you have something that reminds you of that trauma, or that event, and or someone asks you a question regarding that event, and it's kind of like you're going essentially back to square one, and that's a very toxic place to be. You know, just kind of being honest and just kind of talking about it, is that we need to kind of normalize talking about things like mental health and grief and depression, because a portion of keeping them inside doesn't necessarily help you grow past that experience and find closure. And it just kind of seems like Eden and her parents, while her parents were looking for closure, it took them several years to bring closure, because it always kind of seemed like it's the one topic you don't talk about and you don't address. And that's a very unhealthy place to be.
Well, their closure seemed to come more from the loss of hope more than like, okay, we're moving on. They've given up hope that they're ever going to find their daughter. That's seemed more what they were dealing with.
Also, and I don't know if like this varies by like state and like or country, but isn't it like if someone's been missing for like X amount of years, doesn't it like it automatically like revert to like we're declaring these people dead?
Yeah, I mean, I would guess it had been probably at least 20 years, give or take, since the disappearance of the sister.
I mean,
Based on, I'm just guessing, maybe 15 years, maybe, but I don't know how they do it over in the UK, but.
I mean, I've never been kidnapped, so I don't know.
You're supposed to know these types of things. You're the one that watches the serial killer documentaries.
I think some of it. I think if there's enough evidence, I think the state will declare it. But I think if it's kind of up in the air what's going on, I think the family can declare it. But
Yeah.
I'm not positive. That seems to be the two scenarios. They've found evidence that most likely somebody who's disappeared is not alive, but not enough to actually legit declare it. Or the family goes, like in this case, it's yeah, it's been so long we've never seen any hide or hair of her. We're declaring her dead at this point. I think that's kind of the two ways it goes.
Yeah. I think a lot of Eden's trauma isn't just from the loss of her sister and the fact that she was witness to it, essentially, but the fact that her parents blame her for it. I mean, I think her relationship with her parents had been broken for as long as her sister had been missing. And while they, meet for a 9 p.m. dinner, which I thought was weird, they definitely, gave her the impression that like, we're moving on. You're going to have to move on. We don't really care about your opinion with this because they ultimately blame her, At least that's how I perceived it.
No, and I think. Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, I was gonna say I didn't pick up that they blamed her.
It may be an unsaid blame, but I think, or at least
I think
the film
maybe,
represented her feeling that at least.
I think maybe she blamed herself, but I didn't.
Oh, for sure.
I didn't pick up that the parents blamed her. They just almost held her to fault for not letting go and moving on like they did.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
I don't know. There was a couple of like those quick, there's a lot of really quick edits throughout the film that there was like one or two where it was like her mother was like screaming at her, and I guess that maybe kind of instilled that in me. But
I could see that. But I think it goes to what we were talking about earlier with Cardinal, is that everybody grieves in their own way. And some people, and again, this goes back to what I was saying previously, some people need to find closure. Some people need to find completion and be able to move on with their lives. I think for some of us like that have lost those like close to us, whether it has been someone's gone missing, someone's been kidnapped, or someone has just outright died, it takes a while to heal those wounds. but eventually, like, those wounds, much like, actual, like, physical wounds, those wounds will eventually heal. And the healing process looks different for everybody. And I think a portion of what Eden's really needs to, I feel like for her, it seems like she just kind of didn't really want to talk about it. And it just kind of seemed like it was something that was in the back of her mind. Like she was kind of almost comfortable being in that numb space. And I think to a degree, and this goes back to the point I was making earlier, when you don't talk about or be vulnerable about your feelings and your emotions and what you're going through and your mental health, there's something that ends up inevitably happening where you grow comfortable in that numbness. And it kind of almost becomes like the intimacy equivalent of a marriage, to where the way that a husband and a wife, or a husband and a husband, or a wife and a wife, partners, the way that the two of them continue on is they are now one. They are no longer two separate people. They are one. That is what the basic concept of marriage is. And in that keeping silent phase of quote healing, you are now married to that trauma, so to say.
I mean, towards the end, when she arrives at the film set and she's ready to find her sister and expose these people, it to me, that, like, she had just already made the decision that this was her sister no matter what. And her violence towards the filmmaker and towards the actors in the movie, while she had accidentally been responsible for the death of the producer and she was in control of that moment, she wasn't in control of herself or her actions, I don't think, at least the way I saw it at the end. I mean, she was in another world. I mean, literally in another world. The last scene of the movie, she's visualizing her returning her sister to her family, and it's it's modeled after that box art that she had seen in the video store.
Yeah, and you get those VHS blimps of like reality, and
right.
That is one of the most disorienting things about this movie.
I thought it was
that
so cool.
Ending.
Yeah,
so cool.
It was so cool, but it was like she is not living in a reality at that moment. What she is seeing and what is actually happening are just two completely different things.
Yeah, she's hallucinating at that point.
Yeah.
And I think part of the VHS fuzz and stuff going on during those scenes was kind of let you know that she has checked out from reality at that point, and gone. She has gone bye-bye, and she doesn't know what's going on or what she's seeing or what's real, what's not.
Yeah,
Right.
and I think to what Todd was talking about, that is a result that we see in not properly dealing with trauma.
Right.
And just kind of like pushing it down, being like, oh, I don't have to address this. I don't have to deal with this. Like, it's not going to have anything on me. And whether trauma is big or it's small, it's always going to affect you in some major and or minor way.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see, what happened, what happens next in that movie. I know we don't see it, but I'm just curious as to, is she able to come back from her experience?
I'm wondering if Josh is going to come back from limbo now.
I know, we lost him.
We got a picture.
There, we have Leatherface on screen. Okay.
Yeah, he's there alive. Hi, Josh.
Sorry, I don't know what happened.
Okay, where were we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're just kind of discussing, is she going to return to the Eden mentally at the beginning of the film after what she's just experienced, or is she, where does she go from there? At the end.
I mean, I think probably where she's going from there is in front of a jury and a judge.
Facts.
Correct.
And
Accurate.
a determination of whether or not she was sane at the time of the murders.
Yeah.
Which all indications are no.
Correct.
So,
I mean, I also think it in all seriousness, like, let's say, like, she does end up going back to reality, back to the video-nasties job. Like, horror is not for the faint of heart. Like, yeah, like, you have, like, your like a little bit lighter, more lighthearted things, like the spookiness of, like, Hocus Pocus, or like The Craft, or Goosebumps, or Are You Afraid of the Dark? Like, yes, like, there are kid aimed genre, but then you get into things like Hannibal Holocaust. You get into I think Halloween, Rob Zombies in particular, is a great example. For as much as I give you crap about it, Mark, like, it's a brutal, unrelenting vision that he has of just, like, this sadistic serial killer, and you feel every second of that brutality. And you need to be, I feel like, and I'm speaking from personal place, like, there are days where, like, I'm not in the right mental space to watch horror. I had to remove myself from the genre. For as much as I love it, I had to remove myself from it for years, because it messed with my mental health in, like, degrees where I was, like, violent, I was angry, I was irrational, like, and I think to a certain degree, like, having that as an outlet, like, you need to be in the right mental health, the right mental space. And I think that, even if she doesn't end up in front of a judge, like, she's still got to end up somewhere to be not in a position to where she can tell people what is good and not good within the horror realm.
Yeah, I agree. Gentlemen, I'll be right back. I'm sorry.
Okay, jokes.
Da,
Yeah.
da, da, da.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I don't think I've ever run into that problem. I've just run into horror that I just don't like.
like, so there are definitely days where, like, I've definitely run into horror that I don't like, as we've talked about, and majority of them have come from film festivals this year. Poser. But
Hotel Poseidon.
oof. There are certain things that, like, I would never say, and I talked about this with Brandon recently. Like, I feel like I can't ever be like, yeah, feel good movie for me would be like Halloween, and it's like, no, a feel good movie for me, like, if I want to unwind, it's got to be something like Mean Girls, Easy A, Dumb and Dumber, Step Brothers. Like, it's something that's got to, like, make me laugh, not necessarily someone, like, getting choked.
I don't get it.
That's fine.
I can watch just about anything and fall asleep afterward. I mean, with the exception of, like, arachnophobia, just because.
I'm not saying that, like, I'm not saying that, like, it puts me in, like, bad spaces. I just, again, going back to what we were talking about earlier with the censorship of, what you're going through, I have to sometimes censor the stuff that I put into my vantage point, because, again, like, I love the way that the Ghouls Next Door put it. Like, there's consuming so much horror after so much, like, it does kind of wane on you psychologically.
I agree. I mean, listen, I devoured a ton of horror over the month of October, as I normally do. And once November 1st hit, I was like, hey, let me get, like, some sort of Christmas holiday movie up in, I'm like, I need to lighten things up a bit.
Yeah.
You're one of those people, aren't you?
I mean, to an extent. Listen, I will still watch horror continuously, but
You've seen
a bit.
You've seen the meme where it says there's two types of people, and then, like, one half of the meme is Will Ferrell and Elf, and then the other side is the dude from Lord of the Rings over there going, "It has begun." Yeah, I'm the second. It's Oh, I can watch horror year round, all day, every day.
I mean,
The only real influence I have is if I've had a bad day and I'm pissed off, I want something more brutal than normal. So
see,
that's
and that's where I used to be, man. Like, and so much of my aggression was taken out through and lived vicariously through things like through people like Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, and that wasn't healthy for me because I'm not confronting the problem, I'm escaping the problem.
I
And
mean,
that
I
kind
just
of goes back to what we were just talking about.
I just reached the point where I cheer for Michael Myers and Freddy Krueger and stuff. So
I mean, that's not to say that like I'm not entertained by those scenes. Like Halloween Kills is got some brutality to it.
I think the best
Oh.
scenes of the movie are anytime Michael Myers is on screen. I think
Absolutely.
I think the movie kind of falls flat when he's not on there, you know?
I really feel like what they're doing with Halloween right now is a cross between the originals with the brutality of the Rob Zombies. That's really what I feel like is going on with the Blumhouse movies.
I can definitely see that, especially with with Halloween Kills. I can definitely see that. Yeah.
And it makes me happy.
Listen, I really I really enjoyed Halloween Kills. I mean, I think that movie has some really interesting things going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
3 times in theaters.
Nice.
I think part of the reason there's a lot of people that don't like it is they're viewing it as a standalone movie, and we discussed this when we did a show on it. It's not a standalone movie. The way they're doing this trilogy, it's act 2 of a 3-act movie.
Right.
Of a 5-hour movie, 6-hour movie. And if you view it in that light, you know that the next one is pretty much just is your climax and payoff and everything. And it's just because they just lead from one straight into the other, like the Lord of the Rings did. It's one big movie. And when you viewed it as its own standalone, yeah, it's a little disappointing. But when you view it as its act 2, it was fantastic.
Yeah. I was telling Josh this earlier before we jumped on here. There were moments in Censor that really struck me like as reminiscent to 8mm, the Nick Cage Schumacher film. There's just certain moments, especially when I was like, okay, she's watching this movie and she's, you know, trying to track down the actress in it, and the blurring of the lines between, you know, fiction and reality, you know, a horror film versus a snuff film, and so on. And I really kind of enjoyed that comparison, only because I, you know, enjoy movie 8mm. So, you know.
Yeah.
I know you're a Nick Cage fan. Have you seen 8mm? Have you seen that yet, Josh?
Dude, that was the one of the first Nicolas Cage movies I ever saw, and it still remains my favorite Nicolas Cage movie.
All right, because it's one that you'd be surprised how many people don't know that movie.
Oh, I know. So Micah, the co-host of That High Praise, has never seen it, and I was like, dude, I can't wait till we reach this point, because like I love this movie. It's a movie that I probably watch at least once a year, and it still remains like one of the most like weird Nicolas Cage, Joel Schumacher, like how you go from Batman and Robin to that is just beyond me.
Well, he had to do something to redeem himself after ruining Batman.
True.
When he did. So, I mean, he completely ruined Batman. How long was it till they made another movie?
It was a hot minute. It was a hot minute.
2005, bro. Like 7 years.
7 or 8
maybe
years?
8.
Really?
7 or 8 years. Yeah.
The better part of a decade, compared to how many Batman have they had since then?
Accurate. And think of how different those films are. Take Batman and Robin compared to Batman Begins. Otherworldly.
Yeah.
You know?
And now you've got what's his name, Pattinson, getting ready to be Batman.
Dude, I'm so
looks great. It looks so great.
So pumped for it.
I don't know how I feel about that. I really don't.
You know what? I'm kind of all in on Robert Pattinson right now.
Same.
He's like, I mean, yeah, he did the Twilight movies, whatever. He's definitely proven himself to be a legitimate like actor, and I think he just kind of rocks.
Facts.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've
Good
seen
life.
him in other stuff. I think the
High
last thing
life.
I think the last thing I saw him in was The Lighthouse.
Lighthouse.
So-
Great movie. Good Time.
Great.
His performance in Good Time is like
So good.
mind blowing.
So good.
Yeah.
I
And he-
just I don't know how I feel about as long as he doesn't sparkle, we'll be okay.
You know what? Let's get a sparkly Batman. Let's do it.
I mean, yeah, let's embrace it, man. I was hoping they were gonna do that with Batgirl. I'm not gonna lie,
I mean,
because
Right
there
now-
is a Batgirl villain that is like Batgirl, but just like gold sparkles head to toe. It's great.
right now, Warner Brothers and DC have not had the best casting luck over the past 10 or 15 years. So that's all I'm saying. I know you
enough.
disagree with me.
Yeah,
I disagree,
I
and-
like what they're doing.
Yeah, same. Mark,
Yeah.
you're all voted. You're off the island. Todd has been a co-host.
Okay. The absolute best comic book movie casting to date ever is Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool.
There's
That's-
also facts.
It's a pretty spot on. Here's the thing, though. How much of that was like Ryan Reynolds is just Deadpool. You know what I mean? Like every movie that he does now, he's just playing the same character.
He's
Yes.
always
Red
been
Notice.
that way.
I
has
haven't seen Red
always
Notice,
been that
but,
way. Go back to Waiting. He is still the same character.
That is
just slightly
true.
tuned down.
that is
He's-
true.
It's his style of acting for comedy. You get him in something like Buried or Safe
Yeah.
House,
Yeah.
he's a different actor. He's
Yeah.
Buried.
I mean, he even did
That movie scares
a
me.
romantic comedy with
Same.
Sandra Bullock. And he's got more range that he's
Deadpool.
known
Yeah.
for,
I
but
I
he's
like that.
known for his comedies.
Yeah,
and-
I like it when he plays something a little bit different from Deadpool, though. You know?
Yeah, Buried was one that'll get you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't deal with closed spaces, so that movie
Mm,
made
no.
me very, very
No.
uncomfortable.
No. Yeah, so I'm right there with you. I
I
Yeah,
mean,
I'm
he
right there
held
with
his
you, man.
own with Denzel Washington in Safe House.
Yeah.
I
I didn't love that movie, but that's
yeah,
okay.
same.
Whatever.
But so
like Ryan Reynolds. Just say.
I'm gonna pose this question to you as all fans of the genre to bring it back to Censor.
Yeah.
You're
There
welcome.
is there's a continual like subplot throughout the film where Eden basically is like harassed by people that are basically like, like, how can you do this? Like, how can you put this kind of filth out there? And horror has always kind of been this very looked down upon genre, no matter what. And
Horror's kind of the trash pail of movies because they can get away with the stuff that everybody else can't.
But here's the thing is that we are, as a genre, we are saying and talking about things that that legitimately no one else wants to talk about. Or if they do, they want to like make it all shiny and glossy.
Sugarcoat it for
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah.
It's
And-
presented in a different way in horror.
It's presented
Like-
realistically, I think, for a large
Exactly.
part of it, you know?
Yeah.
You look at so a couple years ago, I know that like I have a few cinephile friends, and Green Book was a great choice. It won Best Picture its year of, and it is. I've heard a lot of people say that it's not a great movie. It's a very much a predictable by the numbers, story of like odds. It being these two friends from totally different race backgrounds coming together and like defying the odds and but I haven't seen the movie, so I can't say anything, but it won because it was a safe choice and it depicted racism in a very glossy way. And then you get down to see something like Get Out, or more recently a pick that I will tell everyone to go see because it's one of my favorite films of the year, Candyman. Candyman depicted race in such a authentic way that you get to see how history has consistently just created, I feel like, I don't know if martyrs is the right word for racism, but that's the word that I'm going to go with. And but it's presented in a way through the lens because I feel like with horror you can present it in, as Todd said, a very natural and very realistic way. It's not like we're sugarcoating this to make you feel better. No, it's, we want to show you this horror so that you can grow from this and become better individuals. And, you know, racism is just one of many topics we've seen covered in this.
Yeah. I mean, Hereditary, I think, as a
Great
film
example.
about grief and loss. And I mean, that movie is as powerful as they come.
And
You know,
random
honestly.
old naked people in the background.
And then, I mean, listen. You know.
It's like every time you rewatch Hereditary, you find a new naked old person in the background.
It's the real reason Mark watches
Is
Hereditary.
it time for a rewatch? Okay. There's one thing I love is old naked people.
Yeah, you're gonna next time you watch Hereditary, you're gonna watch it. Now that I've said that, going, how many naked people have I seen? Jesus Christ!
I've seen the movie multiple times. I guess I've missed all the old naked people. I'm
they're
like
Mark just pauses it and just watches it, like deconstructs frame by frame.
There's like, they'll cut through a dark room and there's like an old naked person standing in the blacked out doorway and you can just kind of make it out. There are a couple of scenes like that, yeah. There's scenes outside the house where they're looking at the house and just like standing in the trees, an old naked dude. I mean, there's just, and it's random scenes like that through the whole movie.
I think I do vaguely remember some.
Yeah,
old naked people.
along with the symbol of the demon, I can't remember that they were trying to summon. That symbol shows up off and on in random places through the whole movie as well.
I mean, that movie really struck a chord with me. I mean, one, it got really legitimate, you know, scary.
That was a
towards
dark
the end.
movie.
It was very dark, but I mean, Toni Collette's performance. I mean, the scene after she realizes that her daughter had died. I mean, that is just one of the most like heart-wrenching, powerful things I think I've ever seen an actress do. I mean, the scene where she's just like on the floor and just sobbing and screaming, and it's like, I mean, I've never dealt with the loss of a child, so I don't know this, but that's probably how it would happen. Like you would lose all control over how you would even be able to live. You know what I mean? And then turn to, you know, your other child who is ultimately responsible and just be horrible to them.
Who was out smoking weed and tried to rush back to help his sister and ends up accidentally killing her.
I mean, it was just that movie. I think when it comes to dealing with loss, it hits a lot of just perfect notes. Just incredible film.
Ari Aster's follow-up, Midsummer, did a real good job too.
Same thing. Yeah, absolutely.
He actually confirmed in an interview that the main character and her boyfriend show up in a scene in Hereditary.
What?
Yeah.
Not the actors, but the characters.
Yeah.
Yes.
The characters. I think she's coming out of like a grocery store or something.
No, she's coming out of the paint store is when you see it. They walk right by.
And you hear him talking, and there's a reference they make that people picked up on it later. And he confirmed that, that is the
These
two
characters.
of them. Yeah.
Well, okay. Again, now I have to rewatch Hereditary. Midsommar, that was a film I saw once, and again, another really powerful movie, bonkers movie, very funny.
It had some amusing,
oddly funny film. Yeah.
Just to kind of pull from like other things that we've seen more recently too, like The Night House is another good one that kind of deals with a special kind of grief, and I've talked about this for mild spoilers for The Night House.
I haven't seen it yet, but hit me. I'm fine.
It's super mild because I mean, once you get into it, it's very much like WTF. What am I watching?
Okay.
It's a wild movie. Highly recommend it. But the main character, Rebecca Hall's character, goes through and it demonstrates her grieving process after losing a husband of 12 years to suicide.
Yeah.
and so you get to kind of see, and having lost someone to suicide is an indescribable pain, losing someone to suicide, because you feel incredibly defeated that this person, you just feel like you could have said something different or done something just completely separate than what ends up happening. And I feel like David Bruckner explores that film really well. Just kind of going through some of my, we brought it up at the beginning of the October, when we sat down with the director, or sorry, the writer of The Old Ways, and The Old Ways does a great job at going through, addiction, but also like generational trauma and the things that we leave behind, and kind of like when we don't want to deal with certain things. And I think also just kind of, I'm still looking at my collection. Lucky is another great one that if you haven't watched it on Shudder, it's a Shudder exclusive, but it deals really well with how specifically the genre of horror treats women. And it's such an interesting look into a film that is just grabs you from the initial frame, and it just never lets go. But I think it deconstructs a lot of the issues with how women are portrayed within the genre and over-sexualized in the same way.
Well, they've really, in movies over the last 5 to 10 years in general, started having more of women and strong female characters as leads than they did before that. And it's a lot more prevalent now than you saw before.
Yeah,
there's definitely been a lot of growth and a lot of progress. Across all genres. I feel like horror has always been in some ways the most progressive of genres, because it's always had strong female leads. The final girl, that's always been horror's thing. It's always the dudes that are getting killed off, and the females are the ones staying alive and killing the bad guy.
You had Sigourney Weaver. You had Sigourney Weaver in the late 70s. Was one of the original. Was like the OG horror sci-fi badass.
Yeah, for sure. And so horror's always just been kind of a step ahead, in that sense.
Yeah. So we celebrate all things spooky here, and we celebrate independent cinema as well. So Todd, thank you so much for talking about Censor and its themes, and also just coming alongside of us and allowing us talk about your movies. Once again, where can people find more information about Fox-Paw-Productions?
Yeah, just type Fox-Paw-Productions into your social media, and we'll pop up, I'm sure. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at the T-Denz. That's the TDENZ.
And Mr. Mock, where can people find you?
As usual, I'm just a nerd that paints miniatures. Titanium Juggernaut Painting on Instagram.
And if you guys have made it this far,
I'm sorry.
Censor is now streaming on Hulu. If you guys have an account, I probably should have mentioned that earlier. As of this recording, it's now streaming over there. You guys can follow me. I am on Letterboxd at Captain Nostalgia. And you guys can follow our parent company, Victims and Villains. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and right here on Twitch. We're now Twitch affiliates. So if you guys like what you guys like what we stand for and want to help us get mental health resources, you guys can now subscribe to us on Twitch and get cool Nicolas Cage emojis and I don't know what they're called. Emoticons is what they're called. Emoticons, and also help us get mental health resources into film festivals, conventions, and help us fuel our 2022 goal of getting mental health resources into after school programs, and hopefully starting that right here in Richmond. most importantly, you guys can find all of that stuff at victimsandvillains.net, where you guys can find links to all of our socials, more podcasts like this, and most importantly, our mental health resource library. So until next time, next time we're going to be talking about Krampus, the naughty cut.
That's what we're doing next.
That's what we're doing next. So until next time, have a good one, guys.